It was 5:17 in the morning on a Wednesday in February when the driver slowed the car at the corner of Bordillan Road. Chief Emeka Adeyemi Bright had been awake for 19 hours. His eyes were closed against the leather headrest, and his jacket was folded across his lap, and he did not ask why they stopped. He simply opened his eyes. A woman was sleeping against the concrete pillar of his mother's gate. Not sitting, sleeping. Her head rested on a folded plastic bag, her knees drawn to her chest, her back pressed to the pillar the way a person presses against a wall when they are trying to take up as little space in the world as possible. She wore a black wrapper and a blue blouse. Beside her was a single plastic bag and a small red notebook tied with a rubber band. Chief Emeka looked through the glass for a long time without speaking. Then he said a name he had not spoken aloud in more than 3 years. He did not know, sitting in that car in the February dark, what the red notebook contained. But what was written inside it was about to reach back 30 years and change the shape of everything he believed he understood about his own life. Her name was Nkechi Adaize Okafor, and she was 67 years old and weighed 54 kilograms on the morning she was found, which was 17 kilograms less than she had weighed on the first day of January, 1994. The morning she walked through the gate of the Adeyemi compound on Bordillan Road for the first time carrying a cloth bag her sister had packed for her in Enugu and told her to hold carefully. She had arrived on a Monday. She had left on a Tuesday, the 14th of March, 2023, because the estate manager had come to the staff quarters on the Friday before and told her in the corridor outside her room, without sitting down, without looking at her directly, that the family had no provision for former household staff and that she had until Tuesday to collect her things. She had not argued. She had not raised her voice. She had gone back into her room and folded the 2 blue uniforms with white collars that she had pressed herself every Sunday evening for 29 years and 2 months, and placed them in a neat stack on the bed. She had taken 3 things: the cloth bag her sister had packed in 1994, its fastening repaired twice in the years since, a small framed photograph of Mama Ife standing in the kitchen doorway at Christmas 2009 holding a pot of Ofe Onugbu that Nkechi had spent 4 hours making from a recipe Mama Ife's own mother had, taught in a kitchen in Enugu in the 1960s. In the red notebook, 11 centimeters wide and 8 centimeters tall, its cover worn as soft as old cloth, a rubber band holding the pages closed. She had started keeping it on that first Monday in January 1994. This was the 8th volume. The clothes she wore when Emeka found her she had bought from a woman at Tejuosho Market in 2019, the black wrapper and the blue blouse together for 4,100 naira. She had washed them at the borehole behind a compound in Surulere, where she had stayed for 3 months before the family there asked her to go, and every third day since then. On the morning she was found, she was wearing them clean. There was a repair on the hem of the blouse's left sleeve, made with a needle and blue thread she had bought for 80 naira from a woman at Ojuelegba bus stop. Her skill with a household was the kind that makes itself invisible by working. She could manage a kitchen budget of 45,000 naira a month and feed a compound of 11 people without waste. Ordering from market women she had known for 22 years, knowing which stall gave correct weight on a Tuesday, which vendor added water to the palm oil tin, which fish seller opened 2 hours before the others. She knew which generator in the compound needed servicing 3 weeks before the mechanic said so, because she had been listening to its sound since 2008. She knew Mama Ife's blood pressure by the way the woman walked to the breakfast table. A particular slowness on the left side meant yesterday's reading was high, and today's medication needed to be on the tray before she sat down. She had been doing this since 2003 when the reading started, logging them every morning at 7:15, and she had not missed a morning in 20 years. She did not think of these things as exceptional. She thought of them as what she did. She was not sleeping against that concrete pillar because she had run out of things she could do. She was sleeping there because nobody had asked. The reason she was at the gate at 9:47 on that Tuesday night was a man named Musa. Musa had been the gate watchman at the Bordillan Road compound for 22 years. He was from Katsina and kept peppermint candies in a tin in his guard post, and had called her Auntie Nkechi from their first week together without ever being asked to. She had thought, after 11 months of trying to find accommodation and running through the 300,000 naira she had saved across her final years of service, that Musa might let her sleep inside the compound gate while the house stood empty waiting to be sold. She had walked from Orly to Bourdillon Road that evening, 43 minutes, to ask him. She had not known that Musa had been let go in December 2022. The guard post was dark. The gate was locked. She had sat down against the pillar to wait and decided she would wait until morning and then decide what came next. She held the notebook in her lap with both arms across it the way she held it every night. The estate manager's name was Obinna Ngozi, and he had worked for Adeyemi Holdings for 9 years. He was 44 years old and drove a gray Toyota Camry he had bought 15 months ago and had recently replaced his Casio watch with a Tissot. He managed the family's residential properties across Lagos from a desk on the 4th floor of the Holdings building on Victoria Island. And his performance reviews for the previous 3 years had each carried the same word: excellent. On the 10th of March 2023, 4 days before he told Nkechi to leave, Chief Emeka had sent him a voice note from Abuja. The note lasted 43 seconds. In it, Emeka said that Nkechi Okafor was to be released from service with dignity. She was to receive 4 months severance, 180,000 naira. She was to be given a written letter of gratitude signed by Chief Emeka himself. She was to be given time, not a 4-day deadline, to find somewhere to go. The voice note was still in Obinna's WhatsApp archive. What Nkechi had received was a single month's salary deposited into an account she could not access because the ATM card had expired, and a verbal notice from Obinna delivered on a Friday afternoon that the family had no further provision. And she had until Tuesday. She had not known to ask. The 180,000 naira had not moved. It sat in a budget line on a spreadsheet on the 4th floor that Chief Emeka had never thought to audit because he had trusted the desk in the 9 years of excellent reviews. Nobody had seen it. The remaining staff had new contracts and understood what those contracts meant. The gate watchman, Musa, had been gone by then. The old family driver, Boniface, who had driven Mama Ife for 17 years and knew everything that moved through that compound, had died in October 2022 at 71. 2 months before Mama Ife herself followed. Only one person at that junction had been watching, and she sold groundnuts. Chief Emeka had not planned to stop at Bourdillon Road that morning. He had been returning from a board meeting in Abuja and had asked his driver to take the longer route because he had wanted to see the house. One final time before the property agents listed it on Thursday. He had not expected to find anything. He had expected to sit in the slow car and look at the house his father built in 1976 and feel whatever he was going to feel and then go home. He got out of the car. The air on Bourdillon Road at that hour was still cool, carrying diesel exhaust from the generator of the building at the next corner, and underneath it, the damp, organic smell of the gutter at the road's edge. The street was not yet moving. One man on a bicycle, a dog crossing between parked cars, the sound of a mosque beginning somewhere to the north. His shoes on the pavement made the only deliberate sound. The woman woke before he reached her. She opened her eyes fully and held completely still for 1 second before anything else moved. Then she looked at him. He said her name. She said, Oga Emeka. He had 43 questions and asked none of them. He told his driver to open the back door. He said her name again, and she looked at him a moment longer. The look of a person deciding whether to accept something. Then picked up the plastic bag, picked up the notebook, and held the notebook the way she held everything that belonged to other people. Carefully, with both hands slightly away from herself, he took her to the Ikoyi house. His wife was asleep. He did not wake her. He told the houseboy to bring tea and to make yam and egg sauce, and he sat across from Nkechi at the kitchen table at 5:54 a.m. and looked at her. The kitchen was lit by the overhead light and the early gray coming through the window above the sink. Outside, the garden was still dark between the trees. The tea arrived, and then Nkechi took the mug with both hands and drank slowly, looking at the table. She was sitting straight in the chair. Her feet were flat on the floor. She had placed the plastic bag to her left and the notebook on the table beside the mug, and her hands stayed near it without touching it. The way a person keeps a hand near something that is not theirs to keep, but also not theirs to lose. He asked how long she had been at the gate. She said 11 nights. He asked, where before that? She said a compound in Orly for 4 months, and before that, a room in Surulere for 3 months, and before that, the estate quarters until Tuesday the 14th. She said it the way a person gives directions, without performance, without asking for a reaction. He asked if she had any records of her employment, anything he could use to address what had happened with Obinna and the severance. She said, "I have my book." He looked at the notebook. She did not offer it. He did not ask again. He called Obinna at 6:31. Obinna answered on the third ring, his voice carrying the particular tightness of someone who knows what a call at that hour means. Emeka told him to come in at 9 and ended the call. By 9, the food was finished, and Nkechi had eaten, and there was a second cup of tea, and the guest room had been prepared, and a borrowed wrapper and blouse had been laid on the bed because his wife had woken at 8 and understood without asking what was needed, and found the items herself without being directed to. Emeka was at the front door when Obinna's car came through the gate at 9:07 with the account tablet under his arm and the beginning of an explanation already assembled. The explanation stopped in the middle of its second sentence when Emeka placed the phone on the table between them and pressed play on the voice note from March 2023. 43 seconds. Neither of them spoke during it. When it ended, Obinna's half-finished sentence was still open in his mouth. His hands came down from the edge of the table and went flat on his knees. If this story is doing what I think it's doing to you right now, subscribe before we get to what Mama Zuzu says next. Because what happens when that car window comes down changes everything you think you have already understood about this morning. By 11:30, the most visible part of what needed correcting had been corrected. Obinna had been suspended pending investigation. The 180,000 naira plus 18 months of interest from a company account had been flagged for transfer before close of business. The letter of gratitude, 23 months overdue, had been dictated to the PA and would be signed before the day was out. An envelope with 300,000 naira had been placed in Nkechi's plastic bag. A car was at the front door to take Nkechi to Enugu. A guest house had been booked on Independence Layout for the first 2 weeks while more permanent arrangements were made. Nkechi was in the back seat with the plastic bag and the notebook and a fresh wrapper that Emeka's wife had added that morning, without ceremony, folding it and placing it on top of the other things in the bag without making it an event. The car pulled out of the compound gate and turned south. Emeka watched it from the front step. He had his phone in his hand. His PA had sent 4 messages since 8 a.m. He had not read them. The car slowed 60 meters down the road, then stopped. An old woman was standing at the edge of the gutter waving one arm, a groundnut tray balanced on her head, not moving. The driver lowered his window. The woman said she needed to speak to the man in the back seat. Emeka walked down to the car. He lowered the rear window. The old woman looked at him, then at Nkechi, then back at him. She had a gap between her 2 front teeth and smelled of roasted groundnuts and the coal pot smoke that had been building since 4 a.m. She said, "She hasn't shown you the book yet, has she?" No rise in the voice. Not a question. She said, "Ask her about the book." Her name was Mama Zuzu, and she was 73 years old and had been selling groundnuts at the junction of Bordillan Road and the service lane for 21 years. She had known Nkechi since 2003, when Nkechi walked past her stall every Saturday on the way back from the main market, stopping to buy 200 naira of groundnuts to give to the children of the house. She had watched Nkechi sleeping against the gate pillar for 11 nights. She had brought boiled corn on the 6th night and sat beside her for 2 hours on the 7th, saying nothing. She had learned, over 21 years of watching people move through that junction, to recognize the particular posture of a person who carries things for other people and does not say so. And she had recognized it in Nkechi the first Saturday in 2003 and had never changed her assessment since. She looked at Emeka through the window and said, "Everything she carried for your family is in that book. Not just the shopping. Everything." Then she stepped back. Emeka looked at Nkechi. Nkechi was looking at her hands. He asked quietly, "Can I look at your book?" She did not answer for a moment. Then she reached into the bag and placed the notebook on the seat between them. She turned to look out the window. The rubber band came off without resistance. The cover opened to the first page. Dated the 3rd of January, 1994. A household inventory of every item in the Adeyemi kitchen, cataloged in small, precise handwriting, each entry with a cost and a date of purchase. He turned the pages slowly. Shopping lists, staff rosters, maintenance records. His mother's appointment at Reddington Hospital on the 14th of April 2007, with a note beside it, BP pre-visit, 148/92. His father's blood pressure recorded every morning at 7:15 from the 1st of September 2003 to the 8th of December 2011. The morning his father did not come down for breakfast and was found at 7:22 in the chair by the bedroom window. Still, he turned to the middle of the notebook. There was a column he did not recognize. It ran down the right side of 16 consecutive pages, dated from the 3rd of January 2004 to the 17th of August 2018. Every entry had a name and a figure. The name was Emmanuel A. School Fund. The figures ranged from 8,000 naira in the early months to 17,000 in the later years. He looked at the first entry, then the last. Then he began to add them and stopped before he was finished because the total was larger than he had prepared himself for, and his hands had gone still on the page. Emmanuel was his younger brother. Emmanuel Adeyemi was 41 years old and lived in Coventry and was a pediatric surgeon at a teaching hospital. Emeka had always understood, had been told by his mother, confirmed by the estate lawyer in 2012, that Emmanuel's secondary school fees at Federal Government College in Enugu, and then his MBBS at the University of Lagos, and then his specialist training in the United Kingdom had come from a trust established from their father's life insurance payout after December 2011. Their father had died in December 2011. The first entry in this column was January 2004, 7 years before. Emeka turned to the back of the notebook. Between the last page and the back cover was a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it. It was his mother's handwriting, the same handwriting that had written shopping notes and birthday cards and letters to school in the same blue ink for 40 years, dated the 3rd of March, 2021. It was witnessed by two signatures, Boniface A's, the old family driver, and Sister Teresa Obasi of the Church of the Assumption on Awolowo Road. It was 3 paragraphs long. It was the clearest thing his mother had ever set down on paper. It said that Nkechi Adeze Okafor had been contributing to Emmanuel's school fees since January 2004, a fact Mama Ife had discovered in 2009 when she found a payment slip in Nkechi's room. It said she had confronted Nkechi, and Nkechi had said the boy was bright and ought to have what bright boys needed, and that she could manage on what remained. It said Mama Ife had allowed it to continue because she did not know how to stop it without breaking something she could not name. It said she had never told either of her sons because she was afraid of what the knowing would do to the shape of things between them. And it said that the small plot of land on the eastern boundary of the Enugu compound, a quarter acre her own mother had planted with bitter leaf before her, she was leaving to Nkechi Adeze Okafor, absolutely and without condition, as witnessed above, in recognition of a debt that could not be repaid in land, but that she was repaying in land because it was the best she had left to give. The plot had been valued at 4.2 million naira in a survey conducted in November 2020. The car was on the side of the road by then. The driver had done it on his own initiative, without being asked. Mama Zuzu was in the front seat with her groundnut tray across her knees. The morning traffic moved past the windows. A bus ground by. A generator somewhere to the right started with a cough and steadied. The light came through the glass at the angle that means the day has started, whether or not you are ready for it. Emeka sat with the open notebook in his lap and did not speak. Not for a minute. Not for 10 minutes. The clock on the driver's dashboard moved past 6 minutes, past 9, past 13. Nkechi sat beside him and looked out at Bourdillon Road and the gate of the house her mother's letter had never left and the pillar she had pressed her back against for 11 nights. She did not fill the silence. She had never filled silences that were not hers to fill. He was not speaking at the end of 20 minutes, not at the end of 40. The driver watched in the rearview mirror and said nothing. Mama Zuzu looked out at the junction and said nothing. Nkechi held her hand still in her lap. At the end of 1 hour, Emeka folded his mother's letter and returned it to the back of the notebook and put the rubber band back on. He handed the notebook to Nkechi. She took it with both hands. He called his lawyer at 11:58 and said, "The Enugu compound boundary plot, eastern quarter acre. I have a witness document registered in a woman's name, 6 working days." He gave the name. He ended the call. He called Emmanuel at 12:17 p.m. It was 11:17 a.m. in Coventry. Emmanuel answered on the second ring. The call lasted 22 minutes. Emeka did not speak much in those 22 minutes. At the end of it, Emmanuel asked to speak to Nkechi, and Emeka passed the phone. Nkechi held it to her ear. Emmanuel's voice came through, and after a few seconds, Nkechi said, "It was nothing." A pause. Then, "Go back to your patients, my son." She handed the phone back. The audit of Adeyemi Holdings severance records going back 10 years was commissioned that same Wednesday. It was completed in 3 weeks. 2 additional former staff members were found to have received incomplete severance payments. Both were contacted within the month. Both were paid in full within 14 business days, with a letter signed by Chief Emeka Adeyemi Bright. Obinna was dismissed at the conclusion of the investigation. A new dual authorization protocol for all staff exit payments was written into company procedure, effective immediately company-wide. Nkechi's land transfer was confirmed on the 19th of February, 6 working days, as instructed. Obinna thought he was managing a budget line. What he was managing, without knowing it, without caring to know, was the final chapter of something that had been running quietly for 30 years. You cannot manage a budget line around a person like that. The figure never captures what the person is. The spreadsheet never captures what the person carries. For 30 years, Nkechi Adaize Okafor moved through the Adeyemi house the way necessary things move, without ceremony, without announcement, without anyone pausing to consider what would happen if she stopped. She pressed uniforms on Sunday evenings. She logged blood pressure readings at 7:15. She sent what she could send every month to a school fund and told nobody because she was not doing it for the telling. She was doing it because the boy was bright and ought to have what bright boys needed, and she had something she could give, and giving it was what the moment required. We speak about legacy as though it requires a name on a building. Nkechi's legacy was walking the wards of a pediatric hospital in Coventry, making decisions about small lives, because a woman in Lagos had given a portion of her monthly salary for 14 years and logged every payment in a small red notebook and said nothing to anyone. The world is full of people carrying this quietly, not because they are extraordinary, because they looked at someone who needed something and they had it, and giving it was simply what a person does. The tragedy is not that these people exist. The tragedy is how rarely anyone thinks to ask what they have been carrying, or for whom, or for how long. Ask, not because you can always fix it, because the carrying deserves to be known. Nkechi's land was registered in her name on the morning of the 19th of February. She was sitting at her sister's kitchen table in Enugu when the confirmation came, drinking tea from a mug her sister had bought at Ogbeti Market in 2004. There was Ofe Onugbu on the table. Through the window, the beginning of the Enugu morning. Harmattan dust still in the air, coal smoke from the neighbor's kitchen. The sound of the church bell at the top of the street counting its first count of the day. She read the confirmation letter twice. Then she folded it and opened the red notebook to the back and placed it where her mother's letter had been. The rubber band went back on. Emmanuel called every Sunday. He called her Auntie. She answered the same way each time, with his name, the way a person says a name they have always known, the way a name sounds when it comes from somewhere before the beginning of a sentence. She was 67 years old, and she had 17 kilograms less than she used to, and a quarter-acre of land that smelled of bitter leaf and old soil, and a notebook with 8 volumes that had been to every room in a house that was no longer standing and had come back with her, still full. Now I want to ask you something, and I want you to stay with it before you answer. If you found out today that someone close to you, someone you have perhaps not thought about carefully enough, someone who has been moving quietly through your life the way necessary things move, had been carrying something for you in silence for years, something that cost them in ways they never showed and never said, what would you do with that knowledge? Not what would you say in the moment. What would you actually change? Leave your answer in the comments. I mean it when I say I want to read every one. Subscribe for more stories about hidden strength, quiet power, and the people the world overlooks, until they change everything. I'll see you in the next one.